So last time I showed you all a bunch of speed paints from this sketchbook, and basically it just showed what I did with the 14-day challenge, and that was based off of a Skillshare class that I took. So again, if you want to take this class or see what it's about, then I'll leave a link to a 2-month free trial to Skillshare so you can take a look at the class and decide if you want to also partake in this challenge. Basically, you just draw for 14 days straight. I drew in my Stillman and Birn GAMMA sketchbook, and I received this from Jet Pens. I really like the sketchbook so far. The paper is really nice for mixed media, and I like that the paper is not too thick but not too thin. So as you can see, the 14 days really didn't fill the book up too much, maybe just a little less than halfway. And I also have a lot of other pages that I sketched in during those 14 days that weren't part of the challenge. I started this sketchbook in June 2018, which was pretty recent, but I started the challenge a month later, July 23rd. So this is only the amount of pages that I filled up in that 1 month. And you have seen this page before. I've done a speed paint of both of these sketches, and everything else have been studies or observational paintings. And I also recorded a speed paint of this, so it'll be up soon. And you know, they've just been random doodles. So this is where I started the challenge, and this challenge was interesting because the instructor basically gave one-word prompts usually, or it was a concept that she would talk about and then you would just draw. So I'll go through each one, and initially I thought that I would have a lot of days within one spread, so that's why this first painting that I did for the first day is so small, because I thought I would do thumbnail paintings for each day. But as I was taking the class, I decided to work with more mediums and just play around more, so it really broke out of that layout that I was previously thinking of. The first word was journey, and I started this July 23rd, and I guess I just imagined someone either coming back from a journey or departing onto a journey. So I drew a sort of dusk scene where someone is waiting at a bus stop with a suitcase overlooking the lights of the city at night. And for this I used my gouache palette, and a lot of you have been asking me what I use for gouache, and I will do a more in-depth video of this, but I'll just briefly show it here. This is the palette that I use the most, and if you have heard of the company Magella before, they actually have a gouache set where they have watercolors and a black and white gouache that you mix into these watercolors. So I decided to basically convert a watercolor palette that I already had, and the watercolors in this are Shinhan watercolors, and I basically use the white and black Magella paints separately to create the gouache. I just keep them in this little Altoids tin. These are the white gouaches, and then I have a small thing of the black gouache. That's briefly what I use for the gouache palette. So then the next prompt was cloud watching, I think. So basically the idea of this prompt was that you draw a bunch of blobs and doodles that are random, and then somehow make a drawing out of it. And the way the instructor explained it was as if you're watching the clouds and you kind of go like, oh, that cloud kind of looks like a cat, you know, like that kind of stuff. So you look at the doodle and you go, oh, that kind of looks like this thing. Honestly, I had a lot of trouble with this challenge. It was just really confusing to me, and I had just a hard time figuring out what I wanted each doodle to be. But I ended up with these, and I used the Prismacolor Kohl Erase pencils. And then the next day is when I started to lose the footage for the speed paints. So the next couple of pages I actually don't have the speed paints for, but I'm just going to explain what I did. On July 25th, this was the day that the instructor wanted the class to really draw slowly with slow movements, and I am awful at this. I am very much used to observational sketching, so just sketching really quickly, especially if it's in my sketchbook, and I only do really slow movements when I'm doing studies of other people's art or like movies and stuff, where I really just want to know what information in that particular shot I want to address in this sketch. So I just decided to do the same thing. I found a photograph that I really liked on Pinterest, and I don't know who the photographer was, but I will leave it on the screen once I find out. And I basically just reinterpreted the colors because I believe the picture was black and white. I tried choosing a picture that would evoke a sort of lull or sort of a slow, lazy day, so that's what I tried to depict. I honestly don't really like this sketch at all, but you know, that's okay. It's just a sketchbook and you move on. This bottom doodle isn't part of the prompt, it was just me having extra time and just wanting to draw for myself. So this next day, it was the opposite prompt, where you had to draw with a lot of energy and super quickly. And this day I actually got Faber-Castell pastels, so I really wanted to just play around with them. And I thought it'd be really good for this prompt since those pastels are a lot more sturdy, I guess, and dry to work with, so I thought that I would be able to do some more energetic movements. So I was just testing it out. I don't really consider this part of the challenge. I added this paper in between the two drawings because the pastels gets everywhere. But this is the drawing that I ended up doing. This is a drawing of one of my dreams that I had, and I decided to make a background of blue gouache first, and then using pastel I just drew my dream. And I tried using more quick movements and more decisive jabs, I guess, at the sketch. But yeah, I actually really like working with pastels. I think it's really fun. These next series of paintings are just for me. They aren't part of the challenge. I drew my neighbor's house because this is what I look at every day, I guess. Just did some people doodles and another sketch of a building. These were sketches from pictures that I took while I was in Korea. And then the next prompt was Metamorphosis. It was another one-word prompt. So I basically just drew abstract shapes with colored pencils and then kind of transformed them in each frame. I honestly don't know where I was going with this. I was just thinking metamorphosis kind of for me means change, and I guess I just wanted to start with the basics. I know that in this speed paint I had this notebook, but I never really addressed what it was. This is a notebook where I keep track of just anything that involves YouTube. Oh, actually it's not this notebook. The notebook that I was using in the video is actually bare now, but here is the page of all my notes. I'm just going to keep this here for reference so that I can remember what each day's prompt was. So this one was Metamorphosis 2, and for the first Metamorphosis prompt, the instructor said to practice negative space, just being conscious and playing around with the space around the objects. And I think that's why I started this one off with a lot of space around it, and then eventually it filled up the next frame. And then the next prompt, Metamorphosis 2, was to do the opposite. It was to fill the entire page. So I had a similar idea where I just started with abstract shapes, and as I got further down to the page, I transformed them and made them more chaotic looking. And then day 7, this marks the halfway point of the challenge. The prompt was Crowd of Creatures, and I had a lot of fun doing this. I just basically drew a bunch of characters that just appeared in my head when I thought of the crowd of creatures, and I kind of wanted to show the insides of these creatures, so a lot of just abstract guts and, you know, weird insides, and just playing around with color too. And again, this was gouache, and this was actually the Prismacolor colored pencils, not the Colorase, but just the regular colored pencils. Okay, the next prompt was to create a drawing according to the colors of your day. So this day I actually went paddleboarding with a bunch of my friends, and we went paddleboarding in Redondo. I couldn't take any pictures because we were out in the water, and I just tried to remember what it was like to be out there, and it was just a lot of blues and sunshine, just a color of like a blue-green, and also a lot of warm tones because we were paddleboarding by this rock wall. I did end up taking a picture of a nearby building on the Redondo area, and I decided to draw that building in the colors that I remembered. So this is what came out of it. It fills a whole page. So the next page, there are actually 2 days in this. The first one, this one, was day 9, and the prompt was to flatten the drawing, so to make it super 2D, don't have any perspective. So for this drawing, I actually mentioned this in the speed paint, but this was inspired by the Korean artist Hyogo and his album art, which I love. His album art is always so amazing, and I really just wanted to work with the same kind of colors and composition that the album art has. And what's really striking about the album art is that everything, even though they are on a 3D plane, they are all represented sort of in a 2D manner, where you don't really see the perspective of whatever land they're on. So I kind of wanted to recreate that, or do a sort of study of how he went about doing that. And okay, this one is my least favorite drawing out of this challenge. The prompt was thread, and I was actually eating dinner with my family when I drew this, so I was really just not into sketching at the moment. I was really preoccupied with other things, so I did this really horrible sketch. The next prompt was to transform a past drawing that you don't like and recreate it. So I knew that I didn't like this thread drawing. This drawing just didn't work out for me. I decided to tackle the thread prompt again, and I drew this kind of mountains or stones of thread in this abstract landscape. So as you can see, I just did quick sketch studies of them first because I wanted to make sure that I liked the idea of what I was going to draw. And I went in with my gouache and drew this while watching Castle Rock, so that was a lot of fun. And then the next drawing was the word structure. So lately I've been really into telephone poles, and I don't know why, I just think they are so pretty, and when I thought of the word structure, that was what I immediately thought of, these really beautiful telephone poles. And I live right by the water, so I thought it'd be fun to kind of juxtapose the beach against these telephone poles. And so I drew this like cloudy abstract beach and a bunch of telephone poles just intersecting the frame, and it was a lot of fun drawing this. I really like the purple that came out of this drawing, and I plan on using this mix a lot more often. So the next prompt for me was actually one of the most fun out of all of them, and it was to take 2 previous drawings from the challenge and to mix them and to just make those 2 drawings into one drawing. And I basically just took the 2 spreads, or the 2 drawings that I like the most, and that ended up being this drawing and this creature drawing, both being because they were just so fun to draw. So I thought maybe if I draw them together, then it'll be even more fun, and I was right. It was a lot of fun drawing this, and it was like making just a surreal fairy tale kind of landscape. It almost seemed like there's a sort of story behind this painting, even though there isn't, but you know, it kind of seems like they are part of some kind of story, and they are characters within this story. So yeah, this was a lot of fun to do. And then the last day was the word texture, and I believe the specific instructions was to take a picture on your smartphone of a texture that you really liked and then to recreate it. Honestly, to me, it kind of just seemed like too far into photorealism, or just getting a realistic depiction of some kind of texture. And right now, just as of right now, I'm not really interested in that kind of stuff. So instead, I decided to play around with textures that I could get from watercolors. I decided to take salt and put it into these watercolor swatches to see how the salt would interact with different kind of pigments and different kind of washes, ratio to water to pigment. It's really funny because when I posted this image on my Instagram story, I got a lot of people messaging me saying that it never worked for them. Like, this technique never worked for them, and honestly, same. The output isn't really what I was expecting it to be. I tried using really coarse salt just to see if the bigger grain salt would have a bigger effect on the watercolors, but I feel like it really didn't. In fact, I feel like it had the opposite effect, where the texture wasn't really brought out that much. It does have this really interesting like speckled effect, but I don't know. I still think that this texture could be really interesting for other projects, but it definitely wasn't what I was expecting, which is also a welcome conclusion. But this was mostly sort of just a study of how salt interacts with water. And I also, in this bottom 6 or 7, I tried using the smaller grain salt, and that actually did have some kind of effect, especially with this blue one here. So yeah, this was actually all of the 14-day challenge. Here's the first page, and then here's the last. Everything in between looks something like this. I mean, in the end, it was a really fun challenge, and having those prompts really helped me kind of get started with the day of how I wanted to go about tackling an idea that I had in my head. The class was really inspiring. The instructor was like the sweetest person ever, and the way that she explains her philosophy behind these prompts and shows her process of doing the prompts are just really nice. So Skillshare isn't actually sponsoring this video, surprisingly. I know that they have been recently, but this one isn't actually sponsored, so I'm still going to say you guys should definitely check out Skillshare, and particularly this class. It was a lot of fun to do, and if you're interested, then I will put a link in the description box below. I hope that you stick around for the next video, which will be uploaded next week. It will be more about doing observational studies or urban depictions of the downtown LA area. So make sure you turn on the push notifications so that you know when the video comes out, because you know I just don't upload consistently on a certain day. It's always one day within the week, but never the same day. So yeah, definitely do push notifications. Yeah, and thanks again for watching.